Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the DC Animated Universe Retrospective. When I last tackled this series, I finally concluded my reviews of Batman the Animated Series, and as promised, today's a fresh start for the DCAU. We're going to be discussing the first season of Superman the Animated Series. In a similar vein to my review of BTAS Season 1, I think there's no better way to begin than with a little history lesson regarding the season. Superman is a character that does not need an ounce of introduction. He was the premier superhero in comic books back in 1938, which means Superman was created 80 years ago. Since then, he has seen so many incarnations, but between all of his incarnations, Superman has always remained as an optimistic man who wishes to help people and wants to use his abilities for the greater good of society. However, this is only the kindergarten explanation of his character. Regardless, that is a description to start with. Batman needed a spark to start his crime-fighting career, but not Superman. He's just a good person. This is what makes the character so endearing to me. After watching my analysis on BTAS and the Batman mythos, you might believe that Batman's my favorite superhero, and while I certainly know more about his lore and consume more media related to Batman, as a character I actually prefer Superman overall. I can't help but smile when I see the ending of Superman the movie as he drops off the criminals and flies away, smiling into the camera. And that actually leads me to a point. In 1995, Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, and the rest of the amazing cast and crew wrapped up production of Batman the Animated Series. If you saw my video on BTAS Season 4, then this story should sound familiar. A year later, WB got the team back to work on a Superman show for their new network, the WB, with this new series taking place in the same world as BTAS with the evidence we'll discuss later. Similarly to the likes of TNBA, the animation of STAS was more simple than the first 3 seasons of BTAS, as this was done to increase consistency between episodes since it allowed the numerous animation teams to stay on model when under pressure from deadlines. There isn't much controversy about the animation in STAS, especially when compared to TNBA, but still figured I'd mention it. Similarly to BTAS, I'm reviewing the 3 seasons of STAS and the DVDs, so the episodes in the Volume 1 set are what I dub Season 1. Nobody seemed to have a problem with that during BTAS, so I'm going to keep going with this for STAS. Speaking of the DVDs, can I please talk about this for a moment? The way STAS was released really pisses me off. For all the DCAU shows, the boxes are really nice usually, as you slide the cover out of the box, see the nice artwork and designs, as well as full episode guide. I love how it's color-coded as well. Season 1's always red, Season 2's always blue, and Season 3 always gets purple. JLU and Batman Beyond broke the trend, but I enjoyed it while it lasted. STAS has that all down, but they really dropped the ball on the discs themselves. A BTAS season will have about 28 episodes spread across 4 discs, and a Justice League or Batman Beyond season will get the same treatment. But for some reason, STAS did not. The show had 18 episodes per season, and instead of printing 3 discs each, they got lazy and gave us 1 true disc with 6 episodes, then a second disc with the front side having 7 episodes, and then you flip it over and that side has the remaining 5? This is just so backwards that it hurts. It's a shame to always see STAS get that shaft in this regard, but let's move on. When it comes to STAS, I haven't seen this series since the great DCAU binge of 2014 where I declared it better than BTAS. I don't know how well this statement holds up now, but that's why we're here. For Superman Season 1 in particular, I'm going to be as fair to the season as possible. Season 3 and 4 of BTAS were such an analytical treat, so I'm not expecting Superman Season 1 to be on quite the same level since they had to get settled into this new world and cast of characters. So I'll lay it out like this. I'm hoping for STAS to be better than Batman Season 2, but I'll still accept it if it's on par, maybe a little weaker than that, but it has to surpass Batman Season 1 for me to really consider this a success as a season. At the end of the day, comparisons like that aren't really the point of my show, I'm just saying where my expectations lie right out of the gate. With that said, let's waste no more time and discuss the intro. I had said the original intro for BTAS was different from most cartoons since it didn't contain a generic clip show, but rather a full-on scene that quickly became iconic. The Adventures of Batman and Robin in Season 3 of BTAS was more what you'd come to expect from a cartoon intro, with STAS doing that as well. But the Adventures of Batman and Robin had 2.5 seasons of material to work with in regards to the clips. I love the STAS intro, but I can't help but notice how all the clips are from the first few episodes mashed together. The music, on the other hand, is very high quality. Shirley Walker, the composer of BTAS, who composed the Adventures of Batman and Robin theme, has returned to compose STAS. It's great to see how the same composer can handle these 2 drastically different characters and worlds and still come out on top. The intro music from the Adventures of Batman and Robin was a very adventurous piece that fit a wide variety of emotions as you prepare to watch a great Batman episode. The music complemented the show and its atmosphere. STAS intro feels very uplifting. It's equally as adventurous as the adventures of Batman and Robin, but feels more optimistic, complementing the brighter visuals. I love the part in the middle where the piece slows down and shows more mundane clips of Superman flying and some of the supporting cast, but as soon as the helicopter explodes, it gets right back into the fast-paced, action-oriented nature of the piece that it had towards the beginning. With the iconic final shot of Superman revealing the costume from beneath his regular attire, the episode begins. Oh, and by the way, before we begin, full spoilers for all episodes of STAS Season 1, as well as an additional warning, there may be full spoilers for just about everything BTAS we've covered, so you've been warned. Another thing I have to mention first, back in TNBA, it was interesting to note how there were no multi-part episodes, whereas each BTAS season before had at least 2 of these. In STAS, there will be many 2-part episodes, but to start, we're going to be introduced to something we've never seen before, a 3-part episode. Hold on to your hats, because with episodes this long, there's a lot to say. So without further ado, I think we should get started. And what better place to start than with the first 3 episodes of STAS, The Last Son of Krypton. Throughout my videos on BTAS Seasons 1 and 2, as well as Phantasm, I have continued to hammer in the fact that BTAS was created as a tie-in to the '89 Batman movie. As a result, we didn't get a direct story about Bruce's past, with Season 2 giving us episodes like Night of the Ninja or Zatanna, which had expanded upon Bruce's training period, with Phantasm showing us an unexpected story that took place before Bruce donned the costume for good. With Batman being so popular at the time, there really wasn't a need to devote a whole episode to Bruce's parents being shot or anything like that. By contrast, STAS was not intended to be a tie-in of any kind, so I had to start somewhere, right? Also, by this point, Superman the movie was almost 20 years old, so telling the origin wouldn't be too repetitive. You'll see why, but I think this only helps STAS more than it hurts. The story begins in medias res on the planet Krypton, as Jor-El goes beneath the surface to explore, not before being attacked by a giant monster that makes the same stock alien sound effect you've heard everywhere. Anyway, Jor-El's findings didn't look good, to put it lightly, so let's see where it goes. We then find out that Jor-El, his wife Lara, and their son Kal-El have been out in the glaciers for months as Jor-El has been researching the recent tremors on the planet's surface. We're also introduced to the AI that runs Krypton, Brainiac, with Jor-El's distaste for Brainiac already being shown in their brief dialogue.
The Planetary Council demands that I analyze your data as soon as you obtain it.
You know, Brainiac, somewhere in all those trillions of file clusters, there's got to be one that says people don't like to be spied upon.
Now that we've gotten to the mainland of Krypton, I want to compliment the environment design. The planet feels very foreign as a result of the monster we saw at the beginning, the futuristic technology, and the way people dress. However, it feels very familiar at the same time since the people still have couches, windows, and the planet itself still has grasslands, oceans, and glaciers. They struck a very nice balance here, and I like that. The Last Son of Krypton Part 1 feels like the climax of its own series, as Jor-El learns of Krypton's doomed fate and tries to find a way to save everyone with the ensuing drama that will come from that decision. Krypton here clearly has a lot of history and lore, which we'll continue to see more of as the series goes on. While I haven't seen it myself, I can tell you that in theory I'm greatly in support of there being a Krypton-based series to expand upon the planet when it's not in a near-death state that we always see. As I was saying, Jor-El is committed to his idea that Krypton's going to be destroyed soon, but he gets nothing but pushback from the council and even his father-in-law.
However, he is still mistaken. As I've stated before, the Templars are the result of a slight polar shift, no more, and will soon.
He's wrong! He doesn't know!
Nonsense! There isn't a square foot of this planet Brainiac doesn't know. He was built to monitor all of Krypton and has, I might add, served us far better than upstart scientists with apocalyptic visions.
You might say this is a bit cliche to see nobody believe him, but I'm convinced of this since this planet relies solely on the judgment of Brainiac, since AIs don't lie, right? As a result, I can't help but feel bad for the guy when nothing goes his way, since he does indeed have a plan. However, that is more of a background element right now. I can expand upon Jor-El's intended plan to save Krypton in a later episode, since what matters now is the fact that Jor-El isn't giving up yet. He thinks Brainiac is lying, and goes to investigate, resulting in a great scene as Jor-El confronts Brainiac.
You're downloading. You're transmitting your memory to a satellite. You're saving yourself.
If you stop me, there won't even be a memory of Krypton left. All its culture, its wonders and glory will be dust in the cosmos. Is that what you want?
Brainiac just feels really ominous and powerful as a disembodied machine as he leaves this world behind. Jor-El is now declared a criminal by Brainiac and is chased by the police. I really like how on the fly Jor-El can be during this escape. It shows how ingenious he is. He doesn't make it out unscathed though, and I like that as well since Kryptonians are basically humans, and this just serves to remind us of that fact. Back at his home, Jor-El quickly changes his plan. He and Lara agree that the only way to preserve Krypton would be to put their only son, Kal-El, in the rocket ship he developed and send him to a distant planet, Earth. Krypton is at an end, and this final scene is one of the most memorable in the series as Brainiac makes his escape.
It doesn't matter anymore. Farewell, Krypton.
Hey, what's going on?
Where's Brainiac?
Not another one.
No. The last one.
Goodbye, Kal-El.
The only background noise we have prior to the destruction is complete silence, and I love how they did it as it cuts straight from Brainiac's pod getting away to the final moments of Krypton. It feels right. It feels like people are dying, as it should. I do think the very final shot of Kal-El's ship has some unfittingly whimsical music, but that doesn't take too much away from this ending as Krypton is destroyed. Ending part 1 of The Last Son of Krypton. Part 2 picks up not long after this, with two farmers, Jonathan and Martha Kent, driving by when Kal-El's ship crashes down on Earth, and they find the baby and can already tell he has extraordinary abilities. Martha decides to take him in and name him Clark Kent. That's actually all we see of Clark's early childhood. One of the things I've talked about during my videos on Phantasm or Sub-Zero and Batwoman would be whether or not all the minutes of screen time are used to maximum effect. The Last Son of Krypton runs for about as long as Sub-Zero, and every minute was relevant in some way. We don't actually need to see a montage of Clark as a kid, do we? We saw the story of Krypton in part 1. We know how he got on Earth through the scene we just talked about, so they immediately skip ahead to Clark as a teenager in high school, showing us how he's a very bright student, but through his conversation with his friend Lana Lang, we know he has strange abilities, just seeing through walls.
So, how many times have you peeked into the girls' locker room, huh?
Cringe. Clark also has incredibly sensitive hearing as he can tell there's some commotion at the nearby gas station as he speeds over there to save a family trapped, as Clark also realizes that he can walk through fire now too. He's freaked out by these abilities as you'd expect from a level-headed human being, and that's when the Kents decide it's time to reveal the truth. I skimmed over the whole high school scene since similar to the scene where the Kents find the rocket ship, it's there to develop the story, since we now know that Clark doesn't understand these powers. No need to dwell on that subject for longer than you have to. But this is one of my favorite scenes so far. Clark is given a device from the ship he came in, and this contains a recording of Jorah and Lara L as they tell us everything. It's nothing major, but I like how this is definitely a recording and not an AI of any kind, since they both blankly stare at the, camera, or whatever they used to film this. Meanwhile, Clark is emoting like a real human being. The part where the message ends is the highlight though. Clark still can't believe that he isn't a normal person. I don't mean your everyday weird kid. I mean literally from another planet with the ability to walk through fire, see through walls, see great distances, hear from far away, laser eyes, and so on. The actor playing the young Clark, Jason Marsden, does a phenomenal job selling this conflict.
It's not true. I'm not a freak. I'm not. I'm not!
Clark, come back!
The following scene of Clark trying out his flight ability also leaves an impact since Clark starts to enjoy it. I mean, who wouldn't? He's literally flying through the sky. Once he returns home, all he has to say is, "It's okay."
Oh, Clark.
It's okay.
This scene is all about showing how Clark has learned to accept himself for the Kryptonian that he is, and that's why this is the last scene of Clark as a kid, since the very next scene is a few years later in Metropolis. I'll say it again. The time in this episode has been used so effectively. A majority of The Last Son of Krypton is going to be spent in the present day, but it's very impressive how much character and backstory they squeezed into this episode so far. On the news, a young girl falls out of a 30-story window and was magically saved by a red-winged angel. Out of context, that actually is a really strange sentence, but anyway, we know this is the work of Superman, but we can talk more about that later. That was just a segue into the Daily Planet where we're introduced to Lois Lane, who's voiced by Dana Delaney. And you'll see as we go through this series, but she does an excellent job as Lois, effortlessly showing us her quick and snappy attitude. Delaney also voiced Andrea Beaumont in Batman Mask of the Phantasm, and initially I was put off by how similar the voices are between these two, but upon closer inspection is when things get interesting. The voice may be the same, but we see several sides of Andrea in Phantasm, starting with her witty albeit kind-hearted side in the flashbacks, then going to her fake modern-day personality when interacting with people such as Arthur Reeves, and lastly her truly insane side as the Phantasm. Lois is what you'd expect, the quick-witted reporter, but she'll gradually develop throughout the series. Take a look at the scene in Perry White's office, for example.
Chief, I spent a week on the docks with rats and frizzed hair exposing the biggest gun smuggling ring to hit this town in 10 years, and what makes the front page? Some sprouty, new-age, granola-crunching fluff piece on angels. What's next? Interviews with Bigfoot?
Good timing, Lois. I want you to be the first to know I'm hiring a new guy on the city desk.
Is he cute?
You tell me.
Oh. Hi.
Hello.
The writers waste no time in introducing us to Jimmy Olsen and showing us how he, Clark, and Lois will interact.
Jimmy Olsen, say hello to Clark Kent.
The new guy?
Yeah.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Jimmy. I work as a copy boy, but I'm really a photographer.
Good for you.
If you got a minute, I'd like to show you my pictures.
Well, not
They're
right.
hot, Mr. Kent. Really. I'm like fearless. You can ask Ms. Lane. She uses me all the time.
Bye.
So I see.
And one of my favorite things about STS is actually the main cast of characters. They play off each other so well, with numerous examples coming throughout the season. Since the cast all record their lines at once, the actors have a great chemistry, in addition to just being talented. Tim Daly is the voice of Clark Kent / Superman. He's nothing short of excellent. I don't know how to describe it, it just feels effortless to him as he reads these lines. He is perfect as Superman, just like Kevin Conroy was and is as Batman. But the big difference is that Kevin Conroy was good at the beginning of BTAS.
No, the formula's out of his system. It's over. For now.
But definitely had to come into the role as the seasons went on.
The Joker doesn't love anything except himself. Wake up, Harleen. He had you pegged for hired help the minute you walked into Arkham.
Tim Daly, on the other hand, started off great and is going to stay that way throughout STAS.
Thanks for the quote.
How'd you get here so fast?
Oh, I just flew.
What'd you get?
A shared byline, if you use it.
What I like about that scene is that it establishes how Clark doesn't take what Lois does to him lying down. The two always trade blows, so it never feels like one character is always coming out on top. This press event is about the weapons developed by the series' main antagonist, Lex Luthor, excellently voiced by Clancy Brown, who has done some phenomenal voice work in many of my favorite games, but of all the roles I've seen him in, Lex is easily my favorite. In fact, Lex Luthor is one of the best characters in the entire DCAU. And you'll see why as we journey through STAS and JL. The Lexo Suit 5000 is stolen by foreign invaders, which seems really coincidental, but I took notice of the fact that Lex casually walks off the stage in the midst of the chaos, which is subtle foreshadowing in case anyone who wasn't familiar with the Superman lore was able to pick up on the animation detail. Of course, Clark transforms into, the red-caped angel and chases after the thieves. I'm going to highlight this every time something like it happens, but this is the first example. Despite Metropolis being a much nicer place than Gotham, the criminals themselves aren't much different. In fact, they're pretty much the same. In this world, when you think of a superhero, you'd think of Batman, a human being fighting other human beings. Or the fables of Jonah Hex, who was the exact same way. This world has never seen someone like Superman before, and they're gonna have to get used to it. Therefore, the types of threats that Superman faces throughout these early episodes are very similar to BTAS, however it's Superman, so it's not much of a challenge for him. One of the things the writers and animators wanted to convey in this show would be how Superman's not unstoppable in the face of anything beyond kryptonite, which we'll of course get to later. These energy blasts hurt Superman, and that's important. Part 2 ends with one of the terrorists, led by John Corbin, blasting the wing off of a plane to distract Superman, with Part 3 picking up right there. If you need an example of how this Superman isn't an effortless, all-powerful god, here is your example. This scene of him trying to ensure that the people will be safe from a plane crash is no different than the time Batman had to work hard to stop a chandelier in The Worried Men or stop the debris in Never Fear, just on a larger scale. We can also clearly see the reason why he's able to stop the plane, since he clearly couldn't when it was in the sky, but once they get into the park, he's able to plant his feet into the ground to counter the movement of the plane. And yes, I did just spend a paragraph talking about the time Superman caught a plane, so let's move on. Someone caught a video of Superman. Technically calling him that up to this point wouldn't be entirely accurate since he hasn't developed that part of the identity yet. Anyway, I like how people are evidently faxing the Daily Planet because they want info on the mysterious guy with the red cape.
Well, somebody better get something on this guy fast. I've never seen the city in such a state. Look at these faxes. If we don't get some answers soon, there could be a full-scale panic.
I can't help but find that funny today, since I doubt people will be scrambling to the local newspaper for a story when Twitter has it all.
The Superman.
Superman?
Hey, I like it. Superman. It's catchy, sticks with you, the kind of name that looks great splashed across 3 columns. Make it 4.
Anyway, Clark at first seems really nervous about how people want to know more about him and how they keep calling him Superman.
It doesn't matter where you were born or what you can do, you'll always be Clark Kent. Superman just helps out now and then.
Still, it wouldn't be bad if people knew a little more about Superman. I don't want anyone thinking you're like that nut in Gotham City.
I'm not sure if in 1996 that line was supposed to be tongue-in-cheek or if it was actual confirmation of this being in the same world as BTAS. Obviously it is now, but still, I wonder. More importantly, what I really like here is just how Superman is developing his superhero identity throughout the origin story. We're seeing it along with him, which makes him easier to understand and get down with. In BTAS, the closest we got was seeing the flashbacks in Phantasm Robin's Reckoning or The Mechanic. While that was certainly good, we didn't know everything, which may not seem necessary, but the STAS writers made it interesting regardless. This makes Clark feel human when he's concerned about people calling him Superman as he ponders the question, what will happen now that people want to know more about me, or where he comes from? So to get the word out, Superman scores an interview with Lois Lane by literally flying her car off the street. I just said that Tim Daly makes these lines work so well, it makes it come off as effortless, and this scene's a perfect example of that.
All I ask is that you tell the truth about me.
And that is?
I'm not here to scare anyone. In fact, I've always tried to help people whenever possible.
I said this at the beginning, but this is why I love Superman as a character. He just wants to help people because he's a good person with a good upbringing who just so happens to have powers. There are about 15 minutes left in the episode. Despite that, there isn't much to say, so let's get to it. In Lex Luthor's office, he's obviously upset about losing the billion-dollar battle suit, but Clark thinks that Lex is up to something and proposes an idea to him.
Actually, this could end up a silver lining in your pocket, couldn't it?
What's that?
Now that the terrorists have your prototype, the Pentagon is undoubtedly going to want you to build a bigger and better version for them. When all is said and done, this could net you a multi-billion-dollar windfall.
Lois, it almost sounds as if your friend here is suggesting I should be glad my suit was stolen. You're very amusing, Mr. Kent, is it? Yes, I'll remember that.
This leads Clark to the conclusion that Lex might have actually intended for the Lexo suit to be stolen for a bigger gain in the long run. Here's another part of Superman that I love. Batman's always credited as the detective, but being a journalist puts Superman in the perfect position to do some research on what's happening, like how apparently Lex had once worked with the president of Cosnia, a fictional country within the DCAU. When it comes to my reviews, we just saw a bit of Cosnia and Batman Mystery of the Batwoman where that was the country Penguin's weapons came from, but the last son of Krypton is the first time it gets mentioned. Justice League will continue to expand upon this as well, so we can talk about it then. Anyway, the president of the USA has cut diplomatic ties with Cosnia, and so Lex would be committing an act of treason to do business with them. So that is what he would gain from the Cosnian terrorists stealing the Lexo suit. Appease the US government so they'll ask him to build an even bigger and better Lexo suit for them, and get cash from Cosnia to steal it. A win-win for him. In STAS, this is what you can expect from Lex, a greedy businessman that's fearless with the power and resources to back it up, and it is great whenever he's on screen. Lex develops as a person more in JL, but again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Once again, Clark and Lois are always trading blows, so she gets back at him for his witty line from earlier.
Where are you going?
I'd tell you, but you'd have to share the byline.
Lois Lane is the definition of the damsel in distress, and the DCAU incarnation is no different. What I love is that she isn't that stereotype by happenstance. Lois is always getting herself into trouble because she's a proactive reporter who is so eager to get the job done, since she follows up on what Clark was saying by asking for a tour of the Cosnian ship. And as you may be able to tell, John Corbin is the one she's being led by, whom was one of the terrorists from earlier. Lois spots the Lexo suit, and that's when they need to get rid of her. That's what I mean. She had the situation under control until that point, but she got herself there out of dedication to the job. When the terrorists got away with the Lexo suit, I mentioned how Superman, while not unstoppable, wasn't dealing with anything more powerful than a BTAS crook. Once again, there will be a slow shift in the way criminals try to fight against Superman, but this scene is the very model of how much more powerful Superman is at this point. Take the BTAS episode Showdown, for example. Raish's guys start shooting at Batman and Robin and they have to dive for cover. Now look at this great scene.
You again? Get him!
Not only is Superman not fazed by man-made bullets, but he's also catching them and throwing them back at him. Lois even helps out in this fight as well. By contrast, the following Lexo suit battle works really well for the opposite reason. The Lexo suit is not a BTAS threat. So we'll see Superman get pushed back quite a bit by the missiles or shockwaves attacks, so he can't just punch his way through it. So there's a learning curve as we see Superman try different strategies to win, and when he starts ripping the suit to pieces, it's all the more satisfying as the main theme plays. I also love the animation as the water falls on Superman and Corbin in this final line.
Shall we go a few rounds without the suit? Too bad.
That brings us to the final scene as Clancy Brown does a great job with this monologue from Lex.
We had an understanding. All I had to do was arrange for the Regent's men to take possession, and they did. And now, because of this alien's interference, you expect me to eat $1 billion?
Lex wants to chat with Superman, but he doesn't have anything to say as he floats in the night sky.
You see, Superman, I own Metropolis. My technology built it, my will keeps it going, and nearly 2/3 of its people work for me whether they know it or not. Even you have to admit it's a model of efficiency.
Superman wants no part of Lex's deal and can only say this.
I'll be watching you, Luthor.
And with that said and done, the status quo is set up and we're en route to watch a great series.
Wait! I'm not finished with you!
Hey, look!
There he is!
Superman! Superman!
After that, we cut to space as an alien crew picks up on a mysterious pod, which you should recognize as the pod Brainiac escaped in back at the beginning all those years ago. Brainiac then goes and slaughters the whole crew to build himself a body, showing how he's not done quite yet. And that ends The Last Son of Krypton. As our first 3-part episode, I think it was done masterfully as we see everything we needed to see to set up this Superman's origin. Krypton was great, with the planet's destruction being very dramatic and impactful. We see Superman develop his identity, and we see how he deals with threats both street level and beyond, and how it differs from what Batman would have done in his own series. Like I just said, it sets up the status quo really well as Superman's rivalry with Lex is set up, the relationship Clark has with Lois and Jimmy is ready to go. It is a flawless episode. With this being the first impression, you'd want it to be perfect, right? When it comes to future 3-part episodes, I will be comparing them to this episode because it is a very high bar for these 3-parters. There aren't that many in the DCAU either, so you'd want them to be good. Anyway, that covers the first 3 episodes quite thoroughly, I'd say, so let's move on to episode 4, Fun and Games. The good thing about these next few episodes is that they aren't too complex in comparison to The Last Son of Krypton, so it serves as a breather from that. Fun and Games begins with a bank heist, and not much else to it. Some guys get away from the cops in an armored car, and Superman chases after them. Actually, this is a good time to mention another animation difference between STAS and BTAS. BTAS famously relied upon the gothic imagery to set the mood, however STAS does the exact opposite by having most events take place during the daytime. There isn't a whole lot you can say about this, it's just a detail that I appreciate. Anyway, the scene gets interesting once they get back to their hideout where our new villain, the Toyman, appears from the shadows with a grudge against their boss, a Mr. Mannheim. I'm just a sucker for this type of atmosphere, a dark room that actually works since it's properly lit. Bud Cort also does a fantastic job giving the Toyman the uncanny and eerie voice he deserves.
I'm ever so sorry to spoil your nice celebration, but I have a very important message for your boss, Mr. Mannheim.
Despite being very unthreatening on the offset, the Toyman gives you a reason to think he's not playing around when the sphere he left behind starts bouncing faster and faster around the room, destroying almost everything in its path, including the armored truck. Think of it like this. That thing has enough power and velocity to smack Superman across the face. Clearly this guy isn't to be taken lightly. When the armed robbers are taken in, Lois overhears one of the guys talk about the Toyman and that it relates to the successful businessman, Mr. Bruno Mannheim, giving her and Jimmy a lead on where to go from here. Mannheim is hosting a press event at the I guess Metropolis has their own Vitamin Square. You can't go wrong. Toyman strikes at the park as Lois actually saves Clark this time, and oh my god. I can't describe why, but that 3 seconds worth of running has always looked funny to me. Lois writes her report on Toyman, and it was at this moment that I realized he's basically the Superman version of the Joker, using his traditionally unthreatening appearance to take people off guard with weapons that are not supposed to be weapons. Obviously the DCAU Joker especially is a lot more memorable than the DCAU Toyman, but it's a similar idea. Although these characters certainly did not invent the idea of clowns and toys being scary, but I thought I would bring that up. Emphasis on the Superman version of the Joker, since right after this, the Toyman sends a giant rubber duck to go after Mannheim. Of course, it doesn't do anything at first, but after a while it starts shooting missiles and other weapons. Pardon the cliche, but
this looks like a job for Superman.
I promise I won't mention this for a bit, but I don't see this giant duck attacks being a part of a BTAS episode. The closest I can think of being how the Joker used tactics like this in Christmas with the Joker and Mask of the Phantasm, but this was obviously on a much smaller scale. In Beware the Grey Ghost, Ted Dimer used the show's merchandise to recreate the plot of an old Grey Ghost episode, but again, very small scale. Back to my point though, this thing is powerful and Superman is needed. Now like I said, I won't be bringing up that BTAS, STAS threat level difference for a few episodes. So anyway, not only is Mannheim captured, but Toyman also kidnaps Lois since he was obviously not a fan of the article she wrote about him, and wants her to see the true story.
Hey, look at this.
Toymaker sentenced to 10 years.
It's a very sad story. One most people have forgotten. Once upon a time, there was a kindly man who loved nothing more than making toys. He wanted to build the most wonderful toy factory in all the world, only he had no money to pay for it. Then one day a man came along, a very bad man. He offered to pay for the factory, under one condition.
The factory became the front for a numbers racket. Although Bruno Mannheim was named as a suspect, he was never indicted. Only the toy maker, Winslow Schott, was convicted.
Sounds like Bruno played him for a patsy.
The bad man watched and laughed while the police locked the kindly toy maker in the dungeon forever. Clang!
2-to-1 Schott's our toy man.
I don't think so, Clark. Take a look.
His obituary.
Poor guy. He died before making parole.
Yeah, but he had a survivor.
That's right, Miss Lane. The toy maker had a son, but without his father, the poor little boy was bounced from foster home to foster home like a little toy that nobody wanted. A childhood is a terrible thing to lose, Miss Lane, but I'm getting mine back with a vengeance.
Holy sh**. First, I love the editing in that scene as it keeps cutting from Toyman telling Lois the story in a picture book fashion to Clark and Jimmy reading about it on the computer. But more importantly, a common cliche would just be that the original toy maker had just owed Mannheim money and wanted payback. If you watched BTAS, this happened all the time. The businessman ruined my life formula that I discussed heavily in my videos on Batman Seasons 1 and 2. We saw it in some of the most famous episodes like Heart of Ice, Two-Face, Nothing to Fear, Feet of Clay, The Clock King, and If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich? However, this is a bit of a twist. Mannheim gives the toy maker a toy factory, yes, but there had to be a room for underground arms dealing, and as they said, the toy maker was convicted for this and died of old age while in jail. Now his son is the toy man and wants revenge. And I really don't blame him. Mannheim was a lot more underhanded in his tactics than, say, Ferris Boyle, who definitely ruined lives, but nobody took the blame for it. If there's anything to take points off for, it would be how the episode doesn't play up how serious it actually is. But now that Superman and Lois know the truth, all that's left is the end fight scene. Even then, there are plenty of good moments in the time that remains. Toyman tries to execute Mannheim, and when the screen focuses on the gun, I thought this was going to be the part where Superman dives through the roof, but no, Lois is the one who saves Mannheim. I keep harping on about this because they don't have to make a big deal out of it. Lois cares about truth and justice just as much as Superman. When he's not around, she isn't going to wait for him to arrive. Her actions throughout the series tell me that, and not by forcing it down our throats. Sorry, am I projecting? Superman, of course, does show up and rescues both Mannheim and Lois.
I can't help feeling sorry for him.
He was a loser. A walking freak show like his old man. This is one funeral I'll skip.
Clearly, Toyman will be back at some point, but not in this season. I love how much of an ass Mannheim was in the ending, though, despite only a few moments ago trying to make a deal with Toyman to save his life. That's it for fun and games. Initially, I thought it was just good. Going into the script, I thought I wasn't going to have too much to say, but I think this episode's actually great. In a way, what I said at the beginning of this episode still holds true because the story isn't as complicated as, say, The Last Son of Krypton, but it's just as good nonetheless. The villain leaves an impression with a sad backstory, the character interactions on point, you name it. Having said that, fun and games is just about covered, so next up, a little piece of home. An important thing to note when starting this episode would be how at the end of The Last Son of Krypton Part 1, the planet exploded, sending debris across the galaxy. I was kind of wondering what would happen to all of that, which brings us into a little piece of home as Lex Luthor is demonstrating his brand new museum with Lois getting in her usual amount of snark at the press event.
How do you respond to charges that the museum is really just a large tax shelter for LexCorp?
Of course, some guys break in to steal a diamond with Superman almost stopping them, but he's fatigued around this green thing. So the thieves get away and Superman looks bad in front of a whole crowd. While she doesn't do anything, this scene also introduces us to Lex's right-hand woman, Mercy Graves, who's a brand new character created for the DCAU in a similar vein to Harley Quinn, and while she's nowhere near Harley in recognition, she also has made her way into mainstream comics. But we can talk more about her when she actually does something. It's revealed to Lex that the rock Superman was weak to is not composed of any Earth-native elements and is from a faraway solar system. The bit of dialogue between Professor Peterson and Lex is fantastic as he dares to question Lex since the info about this rock is really going to be beneficial for all researchers. However...
But surely the rock would be more valuable to mankind.
You work for me, Peterson. Don't forget that. There shouldn't be an opinion in your head that I haven't put there.
Lex is menacing whenever he talks to his employees, but he's also great at manipulation since he convinces this Joey guy to take this job and defeat Superman with the rock. But I'm just going to call it Kryptonite, since while the show hasn't called it that quite yet, that makes it easier for me to write. Evidently, Professor Peterson has been a frequent mole on the inside of Lex's research, so that Lois can get all the latest info in his business. The Kryptonite being the most recent example. This has a lot to do with your own suspension of disbelief, but seeing as Lois has no problem touching Kryptonite, but Clark spazzes at the second he touches it, maybe, just maybe, he's Superman. But that's another thing. Whether or not Lois knows Superman's identity is really a mystery, and you could point to many examples either for or against that we'll talk about as we go. Oh, also this happens when the waitress passes Clark. I'm gonna hope for his sake that this wasn't a far distance, I mean Christ. Lex's hired guns get Superman's attention only to lead him around the city. I really like the music in this part. Reminds me of A Bullet for Bullock in Season 3 of BTAS. An interesting choice given the fact that flying scenes like this almost always play Superman's theme. I also really get a kick out of Lex looking all proud of the plan at his desk. When Superman's getting beat up under the kryptonite, you'd expect him to get out of this somehow, but I just like how it's Joey's overconfidence that gets Superman far enough from the kryptonite to pull them both off the roof. Lex informs Mercy that a piece of the kryptonite is in the hands of the Professor Hamilton and to find out who the mole is. That is when Superman arrives.
I have a deal to offer you.
I'm listening.
As long as I have the rock, you can't stop me. But it is bothersome to have you always trying. So, the deal is this. You leave me and my operations alone, and I and my little green rock will leave you alone.
I don't make deals with criminals.
I control everything in this town, Superman. Your cooperation is not really necessary. The offer was merely a courtesy.
You will never control me, Luthor. Never!
I don't know if it really bears repeating, but Lex is so powerful that he's literally getting in Superman's face. The most powerful person on this earth, and really, why not? What's Superman gonna do? Beat up Lex and take him to the authorities? With what evidence? Lex is the kryptonite, and there was no written agreement between Joey and Lex. Lex can get people to do whatever he wants with his own logic and reasoning alone. At Star Labs, Professor Emil Hamilton and Superman hit it off as Hamilton reveals that kryptonite is indeed one of the pieces from the planet at the end of The Last Son of Krypton Part 1. But the good news is that kryptonite's effectiveness is shielded by lead. Lois gets a call from Professor Peterson at Lex Labs as he convinces her to arrive at Lex's museum, but it's actually because Lex and Mercy know that Peterson was the one revealing secrets to Lois. And just give this scene a watch.
You're certain he's there?
Our man saw him go in 2 minutes after the lame woman.
Excellent. Superman will now insist on accompanying her to the museum. Ah, Professor. Mercy will see you safely home now, won't you, my dear?
Please, no. I mean, I can see myself home. Really.
But I insist. Metropolis can be such a dangerous city, Peterson. I'd hate to wake up tomorrow and find out that something terrible had happened to you.
Just so you know, Professor Peterson never appears again, so I'm gonna assume this guy is freaking dead. But I can get back to that in a moment. The museum is obviously a setup for Superman and Lois, with a giant dinosaur remotely controlled by Luthor to kill them both. What I love about the climax is that it takes everything we've learned so far in this episode and uses it all at once. Like how Superman remembers his tour of the museum and that this cup was made of lead, but when Lois grabs it she gets shocked since we saw this was a part of the security system at the beginning. Lastly, we saw how earlier Lois likes to shoot paper in the trash when she's writing, and that skill is used to throw the kryptonite into the lead cup so Superman can finally destroy the dinosaur. In the ending, Superman discards the kryptonite into space, but Lex has already begun frantically searching for a new one, and that was a little piece of home. Another stellar episode as we're introduced to another core character, Professor Hamilton, another Superman staple, kryptonite, but the real takeaway from this episode was Lex Luthor. He was already great in The Last Son of Krypton, but this episode really showed multiple sides of the guy in regards to his standing on equal footing with Superman, his rudeness with his employees, the fact that he murders them and covers it up when there's a double cross, his manipulative nature when dealing with new clients. Lex was definitely the best part of this episode, and there's plenty more where that came from. But for right now, let's move on to episode 6, Feeding Time. This episode continues right where our little piece of home ended as Hamilton and Superman develop a kryptonite radiation suit that will come into use in later episodes. Next, Rudy Jones is trying to steal chemicals from Star Labs, but is really bad at it. He and his partner are almost caught and start a fire with Superman stopping it, with Rudy in the back of the truck with the chemicals, and he's being roasted by them, turning him into our new villain, the Parasite, with his partner leaving him behind hoping he dies. As the Parasite, Rudy can absorb the energy and knowledge from other life forms, including the rat that brings him back to consciousness or the policewoman he attacks. Okay, let's see. Clark and Jimmy find the name and address of Parasite's old partner. The Parasite attacks that guy. He fights the Superman, which of course is bad because Superman's so powerful, but it's also bad because it teaches the Parasite Superman's identity. Parasite's energy stealing isn't permanent though, as evidenced by the policewoman's sudden recovery, so this means Superman will be the same way and Parasite would need to assign Superman again to get more power. But to hit the brakes in the plot summary, I once again really love the kind of detective work that Clark does as a reporter, since it puts him in the perfect position to get information from the police about criminals. Anyway, Parasite absorbs more energy from Superman, captures Superman. Jimmy notices a pattern when Parasite flies away. Nobody cares. He goes to investigate himself, finds Superman in the sewers of Star Labs, since I guess Parasite couldn't find a place more inconspicuous. With Superman free to lure Parasite to the kryptonite since he has the radiation suit. With Superman's abilities, Parasite would also be weak to the kryptonite, and this is how Parasite's dealt with. And guess what? His memories wiped out the whole thing. So he doesn't remember who Superman is. Hooray! Get out with that. If there's one thing I've always hated in superhero media, it's when the villain finds out about the hero's identity and conveniently forgets about it so we don't have to worry about it. A plot device that Batman Arkham Origins used in the climax, and it was just as bad there. But that's it for this episode. I enjoyed seeing Clark's detective work, and I guess Parasite is a fine villain, but this episode is dry as hell. I literally took down 2 bullet points in my notes. Other than the ending, there really isn't anything wrong with this episode, it's just there. It just feels like we're going through the motions with this one, as the plot points happen and then you forget about it once the credits have stopped rolling. In my case, I'm reviewing it and found really nothing to really latch onto. Definitely my least favorite episode so far. So let's get back to Lex Luthor at episode 7, The Way of All Flesh. This episode opens up in the Metropolis prison, and what the heck? This scene already tells us how knowing people can lead to a really luxurious stay in prison. This is John Corbin's cell, the guy in the Lexo suit from The Last Son of Krypton. He has got a chandelier, drinks, candles, mirrors, artwork, clocks, and a TV. My god, this prison cell's better than paying for an apartment. But for whatever reason, Corbin's now suffering from an illness that will most certainly kill him, but to keep this info on the DL, he's gonna need to break out of prison and get treatment from Lex Luthor. There isn't much to this, but I love the image in the next shot of Clark Kent riding his bike and being called the Slowpoke. It just goes to show how he's just living a day-to-day life outside of being Superman, which is something we rarely saw with Batman. That is until missiles attack the prison, so now Superman has to round up the escaped prisoners and fix the hole in the wall, giving Corbin the time to escape unnoticed. Of course, Lex set the whole thing up. Lex's treatment for Corbin's condition is by putting his mind into a robot suit made of what Lex calls metallo, a suit powered entirely by kryptonite that quadruples Corbin's strength. Obviously, now his task from Lex in return is to destroy Superman now that he has the raw strength to stand up to him, and with the kryptonite backing him up. Skipping ahead to the fight scene a few scenes from now, I don't know how to describe this, but one thing I noticed was how whenever Metallo, that's what I'm calling Corbin now, throws Superman, it's so slow, but it's not a slow motion shot since the cars are moving in real time, and clearly they are capable of making a tossing animation look normal, as evidenced by the climax of Bane. I don't know, maybe Superman doesn't actually weigh a lot given his powers coming from the sun, who knows. Anyway, I spent more time on this than I was planning to, so back to the story. Lois saves Superman in the nick of time, but when trying to kiss Lois, Metallo realizes that he can't actually feel anything. I mean, he has all the strength, but can't live a normal life now because he doesn't need food or anything like that. This is sort of similar to what happened to Mr. Freeze, but the difference is that STAS doesn't treat Metallo as being sympathetic from this point forward like Freeze. Since Freeze was in a tragic accident trying to save his wife, he therefore earned sympathy. Metallo willingly became a robot. Sure, Lex is as manipulative as they come, but the fact he didn't expect this was his own fault. So as opposed to feeling bad, we're not going to spend the next few minutes seeing Metallo realize the weight of his own ignorance. Now he wants to kill Luthor for using him. Clark and Lois investigate the office of the doctor who worked with Metallo during his stay in prison, and Clark sees an interesting bottle via his X-ray vision, as well as a parking stub from LexCorp. Lex is on one of his private yachts when Metallo attempts to get his revenge, but despite the doctor just telling Metallo there was nothing that could be done for him, Luthor, with a completely straight face, tells a totally convincing lie, as well as bringing up points that are almost impossible to argue with.
You didn't think I'd leave you like this, did you? I told you it was temporary.
Liar! The doctor can't do anything for me.
Maybe not now, but someday. I've got people all over the world working on this. It'll take time, but what do you care? You're practically immortal. So go ahead, kill me if you want to. But what then?
After a brief fight between Superman and Metallo, Superman reveals that the contents of the bottle he found were put in Corbin's food while in prison at the request of Luthor, so that he could get this ultra-rare, fatal disease and make Corbin want to become a robot to save his own life and then owe Lex the favor of killing Superman. Again, Lex has just been lying about this with a straight face up until now, but he set a man up to die just to do his bidding. If you were wondering how Lex is an adversary to Superman, brainpower on this scale are good reasons why. To stop Metallo from killing Luthor, Superman causes an explosion that sends the other two into the water as Luthor leaves Metallo for dead.
Help! Help! I can't float!
Bon voyage.
Help! Help!
Bringing us to the ending scene.
You'll excuse me if I don't see you home.
You'll never pin this on me. The virus is destroyed and Corbin's lost at sea. And even if you found him, there'd still be that kryptonite to worry about.
I don't think I'm the one who should be worrying.
The Way of All Flesh is another really strong episode to add to the list. I like how Metallo's story continues off from The Last Son of Krypton and A Little Piece of Home at the same time. Good action scenes, and it continues to drive home just how evil Lex Luthor is without being nearly as hands-on as a Batman villain would be. Although one thing I just thought of would be how Superman and Hamilton developed a kryptonite radiation suit in the previous episode, and despite Superman knowing kryptonite would be a part of the battle at the end of this episode, he doesn't bring it with him. Well, this is yet another conflict between production and air dates. As always, I'm reviewing based on the production order, but this episode was actually aired before feeding time when Superman and Hamilton made the suit. But given the events of A Little Piece of Home, I think it actually does make most sense if this episode comes before feeding time. At the end of A Little Piece of Home, Superman chucked a piece of kryptonite into orbit, most likely suspecting that this was the last of it, but we know that Luthor was already searching for another piece by the next day. So if Superman is once again re-exposed to kryptonite when facing off against Metallo, it would be logical to assume that he would then want to make a kryptonite radiation suit. We'll never know which of these events was supposed to occur first, given the differing scheduling and subsequent re-release orders, so my headcanon is the air date order that I just laid out, but still, not a big deal regardless. Anyway, the next few episodes are some of my favorites in this entire season, so let's not waste any time in talking about Episode 8, Stolen Memories. This episode opens up in a strange location filled with satellites and other equipment. Looks like a big budget military op, but it's another mission of Lex Luthor, and Lois and Jimmy are here too. Seriously, this woman will do anything to get a story. With this knowledge, I'm now pretty intrigued as to who could possibly request all the theatrics to meet. A giant spaceship then appears in the sky, and I will let the episode do the talking for me.
Welcome to Earth. I'm Lex Luthor, the one who intercepted your transmissions.
I am pleased to make contact with you, Lex Luthor. I am called Brainiac.
Brainiac is now back, and he's also got a body to boot. Speaking of which, can I just point out for most incarnations of Brainiac, I'm not a fan of his design with the ugly purple and green color scheme. He just looks a little too noisy for someone who is supposed to be subdued in his quest for all knowledge in the universe. The DCAU incarnation really got this right, as he's mostly metallic but has the soft blue and purples on his face and arms to fluff it up just a little bit. Just as a recap, at the end of The Last Son of Krypton Part 1, Brainiac escaped Krypton knowing it was about to explode, having no idea that Jor-El secretly sent Kal-El to Earth to continue Krypton's true legacy, with the end of The Last Son of Krypton Part 3 showing us that Brainiac, after years of drifting in the cosmos, found a stray ship to latch onto and slaughtered the whole crew in order to restabilize himself. So that sets the stage for the story. Lex was conducting this meeting with Brainiac in private, so the world leaders had no idea that aliens were coming down to Earth, while Superman and Professor Hamilton were testing out their new spaceship and spacesuit that they developed. So an emergency meeting is held, and have I not written enough about how great Lex Luthor is in this universe? Just watch the way he talks out of this very sticky situation.
How long did you intend to keep your rendezvous a secret? In case you haven't heard, there's a thing known as national security.
There's also a thing known as free enterprise. It was LexCorp that scanned the heavens, it was LexCorp that made contact, and it will be LexCorp that reaps the benefits.
At what cost? What do we know about this alien?
Brainiac is a collector of data. In exchange for information about us, he is willing to share his vast knowledge of the universe. Allow me to demonstrate.
Hey, what is this?
This is just a sample of his technology. Who knows what else he has? A cure for cancer? A way to repair the ozone? Are you going to turn your backs on that?
This is one of the last episodes this season where Lex's sheer logical power is demonstrated, so you won't have to hear me whine about that for a while. So rejoice. In any case, it's this disconnect between the viewers and the characters that makes this story interesting. We saw The Last Son of Krypton Part 1. We know Brainiac knew Krypton was doomed and left to save himself. But Superman doesn't know who Brainiac is, nor does Lex, so I want to know what exactly Brainiac is up to. This carries over into the next scene where Brainiac tests Superman's strength, and it was a pretty lame action scene, but it does lead to some very great dialogue.
Why? Morbid curiosity?
Curiosity, yes. Morbid, hardly.
I don't think I praised Brainiac's voice acting enough. He has such a chilling voice, and I love it. So according to Brainiac, he's also one of the last remnants of Krypton and has since been collecting data on other worlds in the meantime. Again, not true. He has all these orbs that display the lifestyle on a particular planet, Krypton of course being one of them. This marks the first time that Superman feels upset about being the last survivor of Krypton, since he does want to experience life where he belongs, but alas, he cannot. But I can analyze that much further in the JLU episode for The Man Who Has Everything. Brainiac offers Superman all the knowledge of Krypton and then some, as they, the twin survivors of Krypton, explore the universe. Given Superman's want to see and experience Krypton, this is quite the weighted decision. Superman then has a nightmare where he sees the events that took place when Krypton was about to be destroyed. And at first I wrote about how it would be really random for Superman to literally see everything that happened, but it's explained later that when Superman touched the Krypton orb in Brainiac's chamber, his mind was being given the knowledge at a gradual rate, which is good enough for me. Also, I just noticed this. When Superman touches the Krypton orb and he sees Jor-El, Brainiac quickly snaps and says,
"Enough."
Good detail. So we can instead focus on how eerie this scene is as we relive the suffering that took place as the planet was going up in smoke. Superman wants to chat with Lex about Brainiac, and this scene really stands out as Superman and Lex just have an ordinary conversation. All interactions prior to this were building the intensity, but now they seem to be working together since Brainiac is a common threat. Also, I love how Lex just snaps his finger to get this girl to do something. So Brainiac does indeed hook up to the LexCorp systems, and trust me, this is really important to the DCAU as a whole, but not right now. So Superman goes and looks into the data room again to look at some of the other planets, and this is when he learns the whole scary story behind Brainiac. We see people or aliens in distress multiple times over on several planets as these planets all explode like a gas bomb. Brainiac has collected all the knowledge and data of all these planets across the stars, and much like all the rest, He didn't just leave Krypton to die. He caused the destruction on Krypton after having collected enough data on it. The cycle is about to repeat again as Brainiac begins to hack into Luthor's servers, and he's going to destroy Earth. But this time, there's Superman. This victory doesn't come easy though, but Brainiac is destroyed, the Earth is spared, and Luthor has a great line at the end.
It'll take years to rebuild these systems.
You have 2 weeks.
Before escaping the ship, Superman saves the Krypton orb and finds a spot in the Arctic to put it in. This is the first step towards the Fortress of Solitude, which will really be expanded upon in the next episode. And that was Stolen Memories. I hope it's clear as to why this is one of my favorite episodes this season, since it expands upon the story of the first episode, makes major developments for the DCAU storyline, and introduces a great villain in Brainiac. The story itself was very intense as we learned Brainiac's true nature. For all those reasons, I love this episode. I don't have too much else to add about it overall though, so moving right along to episode 9 and episode 10, The Main Man Part 1 and Part 2. I'll let you know something about this episode right out of the gate. It was written by Paul Dini, behind so many famous episodes, so you know this is gonna be good. Superman and Hamilton continue to work on the spaceship that appeared in the last episode, since I'm guessing Superman can't breathe in space in this universe. Like I've said, it's always a pleasure to see Superman developing his identity. It's a work in progress, but we'll get there. With a good line from Superman to close out the scene.
Where did you say you've kept it all these years?
I didn't.
Far, far away, we're introduced to the main man himself, Lobo, excellently voiced by Brad Garnett, leaving an impression after only a few seconds of screen time.
I'm giving you geeks 10 seconds before I frag everything in sight. 1, 10.
After those few seconds, we already know that Lobo is a bounty hunter who's after this mole-looking guy who has an excellent design with eyes on his eye as his eyelid is his mouth. In this episode, expect a lot of action scenes, well-timed one-liners, and gags. Like this part where Squeak escapes the bottle Lobo put him in.
Hold on, Squeak.
When Lobo escapes with his bounty, we're introduced to the Preserver, who captures Lobo and tells him about his collection of rare and exotic life forms, and requests the bounty of Superman as he is the last Kryptonian. Lobo starts wrecking Metropolis to attract Superman's attention, but the scene cuts to the Daily Planet in what has got to be one of the best interactions between Clark and Lois ever.
I'm confused, Kent. See, I've lived in Metropolis most of my life, and I can't figure out how some yokel from Smallville is suddenly getting every hot story in town.
Well, Lois, the truth is, I'm actually Superman in disguise, and I only pretend to be a journalist in order to hear about disasters as they happen and then squeeze you out of the byline.
You're a sick man, Kent.
You asked.
I don't know what to say. It was just 10 seconds of gold. I have seen so many scenes worthy of praise and analysis on my 3 years of YouTube, and never before has a scene left me talking for so long about how I have no words to describe how good it is. I mean, he's right. That is a fact, but again, it's either Lois knows this and is just playing around, or literally nobody would even believe that if Clark just started flying around the office. So what exactly is Lobo doing to attract Superman's attention? Robbing a bank? Holding up the police station? No, he's literally just sitting in a chair shooting the wall while everyone freaks out on the inside. You see, this is how you inject personality. Lobo just does and says outlandish things. No one needs to make a speech about it. We can tell just by watching him. I'm not just trying to play clips here, but seriously, this is so fast-paced and it's beautiful.
Finally, I've been trying to get in touch with you all day.
Who are you?
Oh, I'm sorry. My card. The name's Lobo. That's L as in lacerate, O as in obliterate, B as in disembowel, and O as in Oh, I guess I can use obliterate twice, huh? What do you think?
Like how Lobo fakes being gassed.
I love you too.
Or how well the music keeps switching between Lobo's theme and Superman's theme depending on who's currently winning. After crashing through LexCorp, Lois stands up to Lobo in yet another display of how proactive she is, with this scene being unbelievably well timed.
Right here, right dirty friggin' rat friggin'.
Get maintenance teams on every floor. Put them on round-the-clock shifts if you have to, but I want all repairs completed.
Kill, red, frag, destroy!
Immediately.
Skipping past all the action scenes though, Superman finally decides to test out the spaceship by chasing Lobo into the atmosphere. But then the both of them are captured by the Preserver, with Superman waking up in the same style of clothes that Jor-El once wore, since the Preserver is trying to emulate these rare species' original habitat. This also marks the first time that Superman learns that he doesn't have powers and under a red sun, since again, Krypton had a red sun, and the yellow sun of Earth is what gives Superman his powers. Before Lobo takes off, he's double-crossed by the Preserver, since apparently Lobo is the last of his race too. But unlike Superman, there's no tragic tale behind it.
I'm the Lazarnian. I fragged the rest of the planet for my high school science project. Gave myself an A.
Humor is so inherently subjective that I have a hard time portraying why I think this episode works so well. But anyway, this ends part 1, and part 2 picks up right after that. Trust me when I say part 2 is a lot more interesting when watching it than when talking about it. Emperor Spuge is mad that his bounty hunters failed at getting Squeak and Lobo for him at the beginning of part 1. As they find out Lobo's on the Preserver's ship, prompting them to get on board as well. Lobo continues to entertain as he tries to break out of the cell, but Superman tries a much more subtle approach as he uses the reflection of the light to irritate one of the other aliens enough to try and get him to bust the glass, giving him enough room to escape. He does save Lobo, only after a promise to never return to Earth, which is basically the writers just saying Lobo is not coming back for a while, in STAS anyway. Okay, edit. Lobo does come back in Superman Season 3, but we can talk about it then. I don't even remember this episode at all, but we can talk about it then like I just said, because we'll be doing that later this year. Lobo destroys the security bots that have been bugging him in his cell, and I only bring this up since the way he destroys them is something only TGX can come up with a clever way to describe. There are a few more fight scenes in this episode as Lobo and Superman face a giant sandworm, fight some security robots, nothing particularly interesting. Right when things are looking good, the bounty hunters arrive to cause even more trouble, but Superman realizes that they're in the Earth display with all of Earth's endangered and/or extinct species. And if his display had a red sun, that must mean a yellow sun is nearby, and he uses that to regain full power and make short work of the bounty hunters. The last threat to face before making an escape is, of course, the Preserver, who... Oh my goodness, final boss of Metroid Prime 4, everyone.
How could I ever think trash like you was worth saving? I got a cute smile.
I feel like I might be the only person who finds Lobo that entertaining. Maybe because I'm an equally unfunny, sarcastic jerk as well. Once again, special praise goes to the timing of the music and the sound effects. Also, a neat callback, since this green plane Superman pushes into the Preserver looks like the BTAS Batwing. So, the Preserver is knocked into space, Lobo collects his bounty and his love and life. He also explains to Emperor Spuge how after the fight, Superman decided to take the Preserver's ship with all the endangered species that don't have a home of their own, and told Lobo that he had a space in mind for them. That space being the spot in the Arctic that Superman put the Kryptonian orb in at the end of Stolen Memories. This is the Fortress of Solitude, although it won't get that name in this episode. Superman can treat this like his Batcave with company since he'll take care of these endangered animals. Although keep this in mind, there was a starfish-looking creature in one of those cages. But why keep that in mind? Well, this will become a crucial plot point in Batman Beyond Season 3. Although who am I kidding, you're probably not going to remember this, and I will inevitably be reminding you of that fact when we get to BBS 3. But anyway, that was the main man. Easily my favorite set of episodes this season. Good story, good action, good music and timing, but most importantly, the writing just carries it all the way home. Dramatically speaking, we have seen how great Paul Dini is in, for example, Heart of Ice or Mask of the Phantasm, but this episode shows how well he can write something more fun, I guess. Humor is subjective, like I said, but I find that his style really clicks with me and leaves a lasting impact. It isn't ha-ha funny, but it's funny in a quick-witted, sarcastic, way. Lobo being the source of all of it, I can imagine that his character would get annoying after a while, which is why this is his only appearance for a long time. Anyway, that's enough on that. Time for episode 11, My Girl. In a similar fashion to Mean Seasons from TNBA, My Girl starts off at a fashion show as Clark and Lois have to watch this. I guess this shows the more mundane side of the reporting lifestyle. I have to go to events like these. That's until the whole room is starstruck by Lex Luthor and his brand new girlfriend, the famous fashion designer LL, whom Clark recognizes as Lana Lang, his best friend from grade school that we saw back in part 2 of The Last Son of Krypton. Thanks to this, we get another funny bit of banter between Clark and Lois.
You know her?
We used to date.
Get out.
In high school.
She's certainly come up in the world.
And what did I say in The Last Son of Krypton? Between Clark and Lois, neither one of them is dominant in their friendly antagonisms, since if it was that way, it would get kinda weird. Instead, they're always trading blows. I mean, she just insulted his entire life, but in the last episode, he just gave that snarky response to why he always gets the good stories. See what I mean? It's subtle, but that's how we can buy this as a friendly banter and not genuine antagonism. Backstage, Lana is captured by some jewel thieves with Clark obviously hearing this, and as Superman, he arrives to the rescue. There's this odd slow motion shot as Lana's pushed out the window before Superman just flies after her. Not sure why they did that, we all know he's gonna save her. But anyway, to stop the thieves, Superman just rips the elevator out of the wall and drags it away. And geez, I hope the reporter's salary is high enough to afford that. This must be a plus of being a superhero. Can't bill you if they don't know who you are or where you live. So back to the story. Lana saw Clark walk through fire as a teenager, so she already knows that he's Superman. But before they can talk about it, Lex arrives and seems to actually care about Lana and be happy that Superman was in the neighborhood. This is our very last Lex-centric episode this season. I'm sad about that since every second he's been on screen, he's been perfect. So let's see how this one plays out.
I still don't see how you knew.
Oh, come on, Clark. Just because I'm gorgeous doesn't mean I'm stupid. I saw you do all those amazing things back in high school, then Superman shows up in Metropolis the same time as you do?
How do you know when I showed up in Metropolis?
I've been keeping track.
Yeah, Lana, can't argue with those points. I guess Clark is lucky to be from a place that barely anyone lives in. Lex's assistant, Mercy Graves, who I realized up to this point she still hasn't said anything, was spying on Lana's apartment seeing Superman fly out, which naturally makes Lex really pissed off. While you might be thinking this episode will play out with Lana thinking Luthor is good and learning the truth at the end, no, she actually wants to be an insider for Superman, which is how he learns of a weapons exchange in the woods. Mercy saw Lana listening into this and tells Luthor, but he denies the fact that this could be a bad thing. This doesn't change what I just said, but with each passing example, it just proves how Lex isn't with Lana for any kind of mutual gain like we've seen with him throughout the show so far. He genuinely does care for her. Anyway, Superman shuts down the weapons exchange, but the bridge that train is on is shot with Superman having to find a way to keep it together. It was a very difficult task for him, and, well, like I've said before, that's a good thing. Superman tells Lana that she can't be an insider for Lex forever since he is so dangerous, but she still wants to keep trying.
I've seen enough.
Ah, geez. Lex then masterminds this whole date with Lana so that she can feed Superman false information, but since Clark is not an idiot, he thinks it's too good to be true since why would Lex just reveal the location of his black market weapons in the midst of a date? So Superman follows Lana instead. Just like Professor Peterson in A Little Piece of Home, Luthor is going to let Lana die because he cannot let this information about him being a black market salesman out. But once again, Luthor has a fascinating reaction since I've been saying it already. He does care for her.
Get out. Get out!
This ending action scene's not my cup of tea, honestly. I mean, Superman beats the bad guy, the tar is overflowing, gotta save Lana, yada yada yada. Not like it's bad, but been done before. In the end, Lana goes back overseas to continue working in the fashion industry, but the door for her and Clark is still left open. It's kind of sad, actually. I mean, Clark and Superman just has too many responsibilities to ever really want to have fun. But with all that said and done, that was my girl. Definitely not on the level of Stolen Memories or The Main Man, but I still quite liked it, since Lana's presence shows us sides of both Superman and Lex that we haven't seen before, which really elevates the episode. I don't have too much else to say, so let's move on. Episode 12, Tools of the Trade. This episode opens up with that cliche. You know, the one where someone says something that will never happen and then it happens.
Metropolis Gold Exchange? Huh. Wonder if anyone's ever tried to rob it.
This place? You need a tank the size of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and the tank just ran that guy over. But this goes back to what I've been saying since the beginning of the show. These Earth-based criminals are no different than BTAS. A tank will be a full action scene in a BTAS episode, and trust me, this time my commentary about this is actually going somewhere. Superman handles this tank like it's nobody's business, leaving the man behind it, the returning Bruno Mannheim from Fun and Games, utterly pissed off. For the first time, we're introduced to the Metropolis police force, and I love the militaristic look they have. It separates them from the GCPD and BTAS. The police are led by Maggie Sawyer alongside Dan Turpin. 12 episodes in seems a little late, but yes, these are two new main characters. The cops look like a complete joke as they have the entire unit here for a tank when Superman just cleaned its clocks in 3 seconds. Obviously, a lot of people would wonder why their tax dollars are going to a police force that's basically not needed when Superman has destroyed giant robots and beaten alien threats as well as stopping bank robberies. Thanks to that scene, we now know that Mannheim runs a gang called Intergang, and that they have been getting destroyed by Superman, until a strange visitor arrives called Kanto with the opportunity for higher level weaponry. Mannheim and Intergang don't know who Kanto works for, but they still take the offer for the weapons. Dan Turpin arrives and witnesses these weapons. When the heck did he get here? He said he had leads he was following on Intergang in the press scene, but here he is. But Kanto leaves in a strange flash of light. Turpin just witnessed all this weird stuff, but now he's pissed the department does not want to make a move on Mannheim. But before we can worry about that, Intergang attacks a train. Before I was going to complain how we just saw a train attack in the previous episode, but this time the train actually does go flying off the track as Intergang wreaks havoc on the streets while shooting Sawyer and Turpin off the road. But in the next scene, Superman and the police get their asses kicked by Intergang. But now let's skip ahead a bit since I don't have too much to say, and this plot summary is getting a little long. In the first display of a boom tube, and if you don't know what that is, that's basically a teleporter between planets. Kanto arrives and captures Turpin, who was trying to bust Mannheim. Finally, I can make a new point out of this. Batman would be powerless in this situation. I mean, Brainiac and Stolen Memories was alien, but certainly Batman could have dealt with it. But this is human beings with their hands on alien technology that could literally obliterate anything. With aliens now gradually making their way to Earth, Superman is a good hero to have around. I mean, after Superman gets hit once from Mannheim's gun, Superman doesn't even fly, he has to run from the other shots. But in the ending, instead of going after Mannheim, Superman decides to save Turpin since Turpin just saved him. Kanto's about to leave, but since Mannheim would totally get caught by Superman, he's in desperation, so he dives into the boom tube to escape with no idea where he's going. Before we talk about that though, Turpin is once again attacked by the media, with Superman actually sticking up for him, thus starting a partnership between Superman and the police.
Other way around. If it wasn't for Dan Turpin, I wouldn't be standing here tonight. Thanks.
Anytime, pal.
We then cut to Hell itself with Mannheim and Kanto. This is the distant planet known as Apocalypse, with its ruler, Darkseid, being the one who Kanto was working for. Darkseid's not done with Earth just yet, and similar to BTAS Season 2 where we were introduced to Raish at the end of Off Balance, with him being a big player in the following season, this episode is just going to start a very large arc between Superman and Darkseid that will not be resolved until Justice League Unlimited. Yeah, it's gonna be a long ride. But that's it for Darkseid in STAS Season 1. But that's also it for Tools of the Trade. This episode was certainly more plot-based than anything else, since the characters and moments were good to watch, but not very special in the script department, but it did contain some big moments for the timeline, and that's most important. We'll have to wait for Seasons 2 and 3 for the Apocalypse plot to continue, but for now, just know that I'm very intrigued in the direction it's going. So it's time for Episode 13, Two's a Crowd. Maggie Sawyer and Professor Hamilton are trying to get this guy, Earl Garver, out of this house since he stole some important isotope from Star Labs, and things will get ugly if they don't get it back. The SCU attempts a raid, but of course, this guy also has his hands on next level weapons, to the point where Turpin gets injured in the crossfire and the bullets knock Superman back, while also making a really strong sound effect when hitting him. Superman destroys one of the traps, but Garver gets injured in the process. Problem is, the isotope he stole? He already made a bomb out of it and it's going off as we speak. So Hamilton makes the suggestion to have the parasite go into the Garver's mind and retrieve the info. This is the part where the episode completely loses me. Feeding Time was such a lame episode, so I'm already not interested in this plot, but let's see how it goes.
I want cable. And the premium channels.
Again, I like how you just get to ask for the premium channels and that's it. When Rudy tries to absorb Garver, it doesn't work and Garver takes over. What the hell? Garver gives up the location of the bomb, which is underwater in a wrecked ship. I didn't even have a problem with this when I first watched this episode, but who put a bomb there? If it's the bottom of, I don't know, the lake or the ocean or whatever, would it really be that much of a threat? Also, I thought Superman didn't need oxygen. Why does he need a dive suit? I don't know, maybe it'll handle the pressure of going that deep, I have no idea. But of course, the bomb wasn't there. Back on the surface, Rudy and Garver are arguing within the body of the parasite. Sorry for that detour, but I'm going back to this now. So, Garver was that smart and cunning that his entire persona took over Rudy. Superman is the most powerful character on Earth at this point, and yet Parasite didn't start talking like him or argue with a mini Clark Kent in his head at all. Clark is a genius, nobody will tell me otherwise. So why didn't his own beliefs just carry over? Maybe it's because Garver was unconscious? All I know is that this is really lame. Garver escapes from the parasite's body because he convinced Rudy that the ransom money will totally be worth it. So Superman disarms the bomb, and for some reason he doesn't just move, and gets zapped by Parasite Garver to absorb his energy. Again. Rudy just then takes over, even though he couldn't before. The bomb is destroyed, Rudy gets his cable, and Garver's in jail. Wow, what a sharp decline in quality. I didn't think much of this episode in the first watch, but this is terrible. Feeding Time had a dumb ending, but the episode was just forgettable. This episode after the opening scene was filled to the brim with padding and contrivances. Inconsistencies with Feeding Time as well with how Rudy's powers work. I looked up the writer, Stan Berkowitz, and I was surprised to see how many great episodes of TNBA he wrote, like Never Fear or Cult of the Cat. He also wrote some of the best STAS episodes that we'll talk about, and some top-tier Justice League content, so I don't know what happened with this one. There will be an episode later in this season with a lot of plot problems as well, but when it comes to the pros versus cons discussion, I think this is easily the worst episode of this season. Let's waste no time to talk about episode 14, The Promethean. The episode begins in space as this general is giving orders to destroy this asteroid that's going to land in Metropolis in a matter of hours. This guy is General Hardcastle, and he does not like Superman and refers to him as the alien. Let's hear why.
What do you have against him, Hardcastle? He's an alien. He has no allegiance, no jurisdiction. I don't trust what I can't control, Hamilton, and I don't like what I can't trust.
I was gonna say how this is very judgmental given the fact that Superman has lived on Earth for his entire life, so of course he's partial to it, but nobody actually knows that about Superman when thinking back to the first episode. People just know that he's an alien from outer space. Anyway, Hardcastle has to go along with Superman because there isn't a reason not to trust Superman, yet. Hardcastle will have two more crucial appearances in the DCAU, so keep him in mind. Superman arrives to the ship and is the one who will plant the bombs in the asteroid, but on the dark side of this asteroid exists a giant monster. He kind of looks like Clayface combined with the Thing. When Superman tries to push the asteroid away, the sun reflects on the creature, giving it the power to escape, with Hardcastle trying to kill it and Superman at the same time, but the creature starts falling into Earth's atmosphere with Superman's attacks not hurting it at all. With Lois getting a snarky quip about why there's a tremor in the distance.
Earthquake?
Maybe Perry had chili for lunch again.
The animators did a great job conveying the sheer scale the creature has in comparison to Superman. Like how Superman sees his footprints and it's like 20 times the size of him, as the creature rips submarines apart. When the creature was falling, I noticed how explosions didn't kill him, nor did burning up in the orbit, but there actually is a reason for this. When they found the creature, there was some code left with it that needed to be translated. So take it away, Professor.
It's a synthetic being. It was built for strength and given only minimal intelligence. They wanted to use it for heavy labor.
Obviously something went wrong.
Very. Its fuel was supposed to be the heat from their suns, but that was hardly enough for the creature. Soon it began to absorb heat from everything, and the more it absorbed, the stronger it got.
Obviously, we need to cool the thing off in order to stop it, but as you might expect, we get the cliche King Kong scene as the human military is trying to shoot the thing down, but with the twist being that it's not impervious to their attacks, it's just the heat from the bullets and missiles that's making it more powerful. With Hardcastle completely ignoring Superman's warnings.
We've got him on the ropes, boys. Hasn't moved an inch since we engaged him.
It hasn't moved because it hasn't wanted to. It's soaking up the heat from the explosions.
Ready the NX missiles.
Didn't you hear me? You're feeding it.
Alien, I listened to you and that crackpot Hamilton once before, and look where that got me. This time, we're doing it my way. Fire!
After that, Superman lures the thing into the water, but the plan didn't go as planned since it catches Superman before he gets to the water. But we saw a boat on the water in the previous shot, so now Superman uses his heat vision to blow up the gasoline on said boat to create the kind of heat that would lure the thing into the water, giving Hamilton the chance to freeze it in the water. And that's basically how it ends. So I'll just quickly say that this episode was decent. And once again, very little to analyze beyond the surface, but quite a lot of interesting dialogue between Superman, Hamilton, and Hardcastle. The plot with the aliens who created the monster is a little too simple for my liking. I mean, nothing really went wrong in an interesting way. It just wanted more of the thing it was programmed to want, and that was bad, so they got rid of it. But the part where Hardcastle realizes how his powerful missiles did nothing to this thing is important, since it's the first time the government's going to have to deal with the fact that they are weak and powerless to these alien threats. Some parts of the government don't trust Superman fully because he's so powerful and not restricted by law in any way. As the number of alien and alternate dimension threats increase throughout STAS and JL, the government will eventually take action, and that includes some of the underhanded experiments we've seen in BTAS already. But we'll have to see how this plays out. But that's it for the Promethean. Good, but nothing more. I do have quite a lot to say about the next one though. Episodes 15 and 16, Blasts from the Past Part 1 and Part 2. So, at the start of the episode, Hamilton's working on Superman's spaceship, which again is a modified version of the ship Superman came to Earth in. Hamilton and Superman discover this strange projection device inside, with Superman recognizing it as the Phantom Zone projector, a portal to the alternate dimension that the Kryptonians sent their prisoners to. Because remember Jor-El's plan to save Krypton. He said,
"Put everyone in the Phantom Zone. The ship will get him there. I know, I built it. It was part of the plan. Save everyone in the Phantom Zone, travel to Earth, then bring them back. Now it's only good for a lifeboat."
When Brainiac and the Council rejected him, he scrapped the plan to have Superman release them when he's of age and just send him to Earth instead. Anyway, they accidentally release a giant worm monster that immediately goes crazy, and already we have a problem. This scene maybe goes to show what kind of creatures are put in there, but it adds nothing to the story beyond a fight scene at the beginning. I'm not even saying it's bad, I just think it's filler. In the Phantom Zone, a Kryptonian woman by the name of Mala is inside. Before releasing her, Superman learns of her past, and I think this is the single best moment in the entire episode. Krypton was fascinating in the series debut, but that trend continues here as we see what happened on Krypton well before the destruction of the planet. Mala was led by Jax-Ur, who was excellently voiced by Ron Perlman, who did Clayface back in BTAS. Jax-Ur thought the Council was weak on Krypton and decided to lead an insurrection and take control of the planet for himself, but Jor-El was enough of a genius to hack into the technology that Jax-Ur's men had and incapacitated them, giving him and his crew enough time to take Jax-Ur and Mala hostage and put them on trial when they're then put into the Phantom Zone. I don't really know what to say about this. I just think it's interesting to see what Jor-El did before sending Kal-El to Earth, which is usually something we never see. Since Mala served her sentence, Superman and Hamilton release her. While we did see Superman develop his superhero identity in the first episode, we never saw him training with his powers, so it's nice to see him teach someone else. While we know this status quo change probably won't last, it's nice to see Superman interact with someone else in his race since we know that he has a longing for that. But it's time for the episode to go downhill. Superman and Mala work together on stopping some criminals, but Superman gets really upset at her for being too harsh. This makes sense in theory, but in execution it leaves a lot to be desired, since she didn't even do anything. She tossed one guy and ripped off the roof of the car and picked up the driver. Sure, the car's damaged, but they're bank robbers, who cares? Maybe she broke his legs or bashed his head through a steel wall or something, I would understand. Mala's watching TV when she gets some critics from the news and destroys the TV. I remember the last time we saw something like this, it was played for laughs.
He and criminals like the Joker are cut from the same cloth.
What? Compare me to Batman? I got more style, more brains. I'm certainly a better dresser.
But this is supposed to be serious, and it's just lame. And if we're talking about cliches, Mala then walks into the room and overhears Hamilton and Superman considering whether or not it was a mistake to let her out. And of course, instead of just talking it out, she freaks out and is going to become a villain. So she fakes being on his side until Lois pisses her off.
Yeah, right. I'm Wonder Woman.
Allow me.
Who's the rookie in the tiara?
I'm not sure.
I'm just gonna ignore that and let you watch the Watchtower database video to figure that doozy out. Superman and Mala fight, and this includes a scene of saving a building from being destroyed, which again is a challenge for Superman. But since I've said that like a million times now, I'll also add the fact that some consider the DCAU Superman to be weak, but I just think it makes victories more satisfying if he has trouble doing certain things that we would most certainly never even be able to attempt. Mala beats the professor and steals the projector, with the obvious plan being to bring back Jax-Ur, with part 1 ending there. Hamilton is brought to Superman's Arctic home, where he gives it the name the Fortress of Solitude, and Superman thinks it's catchy, so we're officially allowed to call it that. They're there to build a new Phantom Zone projector, with Superman taking off to face Mala and Jax-Ur, who are terrorizing the streets. I love Superman's no-nonsense attitude in facing the General.
Though I see you share his poor judgment in choosing sides.
Glad to disappoint you.
You'll face the General when spoken to.
I must say, it seems a shame to kill the one other survivor of Krypton. I'd offer you a place in our new order, but something tells me you'd turn it down.
Guess you're not as dumb as you look.
As I expected. Mala, crush his skull.
What the hell kind of attack was that? I do not think that's how physics work, but okay. So a few things happen from here. They can't get their projector working since they don't have the right frequency or crystal or whatever. Jax-Ur and Mala raid the Daily Planet and profess their new world order, capture Lois. Superman uses kryptonite against Mala, but is trapped in the Phantom Zone. Thinking it's over, the villains leave as Hamilton realizes that because Superman's kryptonite radiation suit was built on Earth, it has a traceable energy signal, whatever that means. He doesn't need the special frequency for this one. Great, that makes sense. And also, there's no struggle here. Superman's trapped in this alternate dimension, he just gets pulled out. And there's only 5 minutes left, so there's a fight scene as Superman tries to lead Mala and Jax to Hamilton since they found the special component to get the projector working, and I don't care about this action scene. It comes too little too late. The story sucked by this point, so who cares? I mean, there's no grand ending. Both Jax-Thor and Mala just fall for the trap and are put in the Phantom Zone, and that's the end of them. In the Fortress of Solitude, Superman puts the projector away, and that's the end of that. Yikes, this was not a good episode. The story felt very contrived to get from point A to point B, and while there are good ideas in Blast from the Past, as well as things that are genuinely good, like Superman's character and the flashback on Krypton, but the pacing is terrible, and as are the cliche moments that push the plot along. Fight scenes carry less weight since the story is so poorly done, you name it. Back to execution though. There is literally a scene where Superman is warped to the Phantom Zone and they do nothing with it? This is a story that's begging for a part 3, but it doesn't get the screen time it needed, and they also use padding at the beginning of part 1. I don't like this episode. It's very bottom tier for STAS Season 1, and it's disappointing because I remember liking this one. Like I've said though, Feeding Time was bland as all get out with a lame ending. Two's the Crowd really sucked, but this, it also sucks. But Two's the Crowd really wins out in the suckitude category, because this episode at least does have the 2 positives I did mention, as opposed to Two's the Crowd, which had really none. What I do know is that these 4 episodes really are the notable exceptions in this season, since every other episode we've covered was at least good, if not great. Which leads me right into episode 17, Live Wire. I already gave a basic rundown of this episode during Girls' Night Out in TNBA, but let's talk about it. The opening scene shows most of Metropolis listening to an obnoxious radio personality named Leslie Willis, who trashes Superman all the time. I love how she's the perfect embodiment of the people who don't care for Superman in real life, saying everything's easy for him and all that junk. I can talk more about what she says in a moment though, but then the guy who's operating the crane suddenly realizes it's malfunctioning and starts falling to his death. You know, given how many random freaking crane crashes there are in Metropolis, you would think people would appreciate Superman a little more. I mean, Christ, if this happens like every day, the mortality rate in Metropolis must have been ridiculous. Clark and Lois are there to interview Leslie, but she wants to do it live and gives them a hard time, with Clark having a great walkout as he goes to take care of the fallen crane.
Something wrong, Mr. Kent? Am I boring you?
As a matter of fact, you are.
Ooh, don't go away mad, Clarky.
You can sort of add this episode to the list of industry commentary in the DCAU. To recap, Baby Doll and Beware the Grey Ghost talked about the dangers of typecasting, and Mean Season showed the effects of ageism and stressing looks over talent. This goes in a different direction, showing an obnoxious radio personality that, as Clark says,
that's what shock jocks do, Lois. They create controversy, stir things up.
Like, people believe the things she's saying just because she seems relatable, despite everything she's saying being clear lies and bias to build up controversy in the populace, which will drive up ratings on her network. Leslie has a live show called Live Wire in the middle of a rainstorm, with her producers advising a delay since it could be dangerous. But of course, she has to keep up the activity in the fandom and keeps going anyway, to the point where she goes against the police and Superman when the storm gets really bad. Of course, this ends terribly since the equipment starts to get fried by lightning, and Leslie does as a result. You could say that a bolt of lightning turning her into an electric monster is probably weird, but not much weirder than, say, Joker's backstory either. Of course, she blames Superman for her current state, even though this is so obviously her fault. But that just goes along with the BTAS villains being crazy enough to think Batman was responsible for their issues. Anyway, Leslie's now Live Wire, and she's a brand new character for the DCAU that also made her way into mainstream comics from here. Live Wire can fuse electricity, so she's basically going to be getting attention 24/7 from the people of Metropolis. With all the tech shut down in the city, that includes the guidance systems on airplanes, which I actually had to widen my eyes when these 2 planes were about to crash before Superman showed up. But there's not a whole lot of the episode left from this point. The final fight between Superman and Live Wire is a little lame though. She just zaps him over and over, and then it's a massive anticlimax where she completely beats herself. Superman, of course, does save her and is going to be operated on. We know how that goes in the TNBA episode. In conclusion, Live Wire was actually pretty good. It's not my favorite STAS episode. I would probably put it below My Girl in that category, since the story does start to lose steam in the second half with a massive anticlimax, but there aren't really any big issues. With that said though, it's time for the final episode, episode 18, Speed Demons. Despite this being another unceremonious DCAU last episode, it's a big event in the canon. This episode marks the debut of The Flash, another DC Comics character who has always been a Justice League staple since the group formed in comic books. So that means we have Batman. We saw Zatanna in BTAS, who's been a Justice Leaguer in comic books before. We have Superman, and now The Flash. When the episode starts, Superman really doesn't like Flash all that much, despite his Boy Scout reputation. What I hate about the Flash in this episode is how dependent upon the lighting, one of Flash's earpieces will be white while the other one's yellow. It had to have been on purpose, but for some reason it just distracts me. But back to Superman's perspective, I don't blame him since Flash is a jerk at the beginning. Makes you wonder how in the heck he's a superhero to begin with. But anyway, the episode's framed around a charity race around the planet between Superman and the Flash. Thankfully, this episode spends very little time on the whole race aspect, since that would get old faster than the Flash runs around the world in JLU. One of the guys in the crowd is evidently evil, as he and his brother have some kind of weather-based technology. Meet the Weather Wizard, and in his first display of power, he causes the tides to rise while the ship is on the water, with Superman obviously wanting to stop the race and save the day, as Flash has no choice but to help out. Gotta love how he has enough speed to do a complete U-turn on the water, but anyway. I also love how much this ship captain's overacting.
The hull's split! We can't contain the oil!
Superman and Flash actually do work well together as Superman seals the hole in the ship, but Flash runs fast enough to raise the ship out of the ground. Flash has this really mysterious quality to him in STAS. We don't know his origins or anything like that, because these are all things to be discovered in JL. Weather Wizard is demanding like $1 billion, but can I please take a second to laugh at that stupid superhero cliche? Like, all these bad guys want tons and tons of money in like 2 hours, but what country can even orchestrate such a payment? I mean, I'm not mad, it's just something I thought about while watching this episode at like 2 a.m. Skipping ahead a few scenes, Weather Wizard's brother wants out since he...
I made this machine to help people.
Oh, shut up. That's another cliche I actually am miffed about. Like, really? How is a device that literally changes weather at such a degree, like increasing waves or causing enough snow to encase Superman and Flash in ice, supposed to help anyone in theory? Weather Wizard surprisingly does let his brother go, but then tries to kill him with the machine, with of course Superman saving him. But I was surprised by that intent alone. Flash started off as more of a celebrity than a superhero, but after seeing Superman, Flash has changed and actually does want to help out, as shown in the climax.
You should have heeded the storm warning, Superman.
There's been a change in the weather. What?
And then the machine is destroyed, Superman gets everyone out, and in the end, Flash and Superman have come to an understanding, ending Speed Demons, which is a very high quality episode as shown by the script. But I really don't have much else to say about it, so let's see how it ends.
Hey, we never did settle who's the fastest man alive.
No, we never did.
On your mark.
Get set.
Go!
And that was Superman the Animated Series Season 1. To address what I said at the beginning of the review, Superman the Animated Series Season 1 only needed to really be about as good as the first 2 seasons of BTAS for me to consider it a success. And after having watched these 18 episodes and discussing them so thoroughly, I think it's very easy for me to say that this season does a great job. Right off the bat, we get another telling of the Superman origin story, but the team behind the DCAU made it interesting and worth watching as we see Clark Kent really develop his identity as Superman and his relationships with the likes of Lois, Jimmy, or the villains like Lex Luthor. Once again, I think the STAS TNBA animation shift was a good thing. Superman felt very relatable and not overpowered in the slightest. Despite having to deal with grim odds at times, Superman does it all with a positive attitude, and that's what's so great about the character. Speaking of characters, that's one of the biggest things STAS excels at. The interaction between Lois, Clark, and Jimmy was very well done and entertaining. Lex Luthor already has been revealed to be a complex human being that does pose a significant threat to Superman with how much power he has in areas that aren't necessarily physical. I'm not gonna lie, this season really doesn't suffer from new show syndrome where it feels like the cast and crew are just getting into it. And maybe the team's 3 years working on Batman the Animated Series was a big part of that, but this was a whole new world, cast of characters, and tone from BTAS, and they really pull it off. Hats off for that. I would watch The Last Son of Krypton, A Little Piece of Home, Stolen Memories, or The Main Man before some of my favorites from BTAS Season 1 like Beware the Grey Ghost or Two-Face, or even before some of my favorites from Season 3 like Baby Doll, Demon's Quest, or Bane. Of course, Season 3 of BTAS still wins out between these two, since one thing STAS Season 1 does suffer from would be how a few of the good episodes don't have much depth beyond the surface, like the Promethean or Speed Demons, whereas BTAS Season 3 has the likes of A Bullet for Bullock and Trial. Of course, there were the 4 episodes I didn't like, but even then, these weren't offensive to my eyes like I've got Batman in My Basement or Prophecy of Doom. As is, these poor STAS episodes were just not done well, but not unwatchably so. That's not to say I think BTAS has many more unwatchable episodes than those two, but still, even these meh or bad STAS episodes were better than the meh or bad BTAS episodes. Many of the things STAS Season 1 established will be further expanded upon in later episodes of this series or in Justice League, and it was very interesting to go back and see these things set up as we march through the DCAU. But another interesting thing about storytelling in Superman Season 1 is the non-linear approach it takes. This line's actually a bit off script though, so bear with me. All story points begin in The Last Son of Krypton, Part 1, where Krypton's destroyed. Clark's high school life is set up in Part 2, and then we see Superman really fully emerge in Part 3. Right? So, John Corbin, he's one of the terrorists from The Last Son of Krypton Part 1, or no, not Part 1, Part 2 and Part 3. And then he doesn't appear again until The Way of All Flesh in Episode 7, but this follows up upon a little piece of home where we got the follow-up to the planet's destruction in Part 1 and the Lex and Superman dynamic in Part 3 of The Last Son of Krypton. So it ties John Corbin to Krypton's destruction since he's powered by kryptonite now, which was discovered in a little piece of home. Like Brainiac. Brainiac was a character from Part 1 of The Last Son of Krypton, and he escapes from the planet before it blows up, and he's picked up in the end of Part 3. We don't see him again until Episode 8, where we learn more about what happened in The Last Son of Krypton. And then the story of Krypton in general starts in The Last Son of Krypton Part 1. We learn more about it in Stolen Memories, and we learn more about it in Blast from the Past. Another example we see in The Last Son of Krypton, Superman has a high school friend, Lana Lang, and we don't see her again until My Girl. Stuff like this. It's just this approach to storytelling that STAS has that I find very interesting, that ties events together in an interesting way, if not entirely one after another like other story-based shows would be. But back to the script. I had a great time going back to Superman the Animated Series and seeing how Season 1, despite not being perfect, certainly did live up to expectations, and because of that, I cannot wait to revisit the next 2 seasons of STAS and see how much it improves like BTAS did from Seasons 1 to 4. After all, TNBA is still the best season in the DCAU we've covered yet, but since STAS Season 2 was airing right alongside it, we will have to see what they cook up for Superman. With that said, I thank you all for watching this long as I'll get out Superman Season 1 review. Something tells me that much like BTAS, it's only getting longer from here. So take care, guys.